but I'm asking crucially, how on earth do you think we turn towns such as this around? What does it take? Also, a new poll shows that rural voters seem to be switching to Labour. What's causing that, and is the blue wall crumbling? And last but not least, Sadiq Khan, he has just confirmed he's going to roll out free school meals for all primary school children in London. The chef, Jamie Oliver, he's jumped on board and said that that should be extended across the whole country. Should it? Do you want to pay for the meals for the wealthy parents? Is that your job to feed their kids at school? You tell me. Indeed, we'll get stuck into all of that in just a few minutes. But before we do, let's cross live to Polly Middlehurst for tonight's latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB Newsroom tonight is that post office workers caught up in the Horizon IT scandal could have their names cleared by the end of this year. Postal Services Minister Kevin Hollinrake said today new legislation to exonerate sub-postmasters and mistresses in England and Wales will be introduced within weeks. There'll also be an upfront payment of £75,000 to compensate those who were jailed or bankrupted as a result of flawed computer software which wrongly showed money was missing. Mr Hollinrake also said victims will get the justice they deserve.
We intend to bring forward legislation as soon as we can to overturn the convictions of all those convicted in England or Wales on the basis of post office evidence given during the Horizon scandal. The Government will, in the coming days, consider whether to include the small number of cases that have already been considered by the appeal courts and the convictions upheld.
Well, Lord Arbuthnot, who is an MP at the time of the scandal, says he's pleased with the result.
Very pleased indeed. The government has moved very quickly and the drama has had a galvanising effect. I am delighted, both because it means that convictions are going to be overturned which otherwise simply wouldn't have been, and because it looks as though there's going to be a usefully speeded up way of dealing with compensation, or as we must now call it, redress. So I'm delighted.
But one of the victims of the post office scandal, Vijay Parekh, told GB News more should be done.
All the people who are involved in this get the same treatment we have had, all this convicted postmasters, and let them feel how we felt. We've done nothing and we've been imprisoned. They have done something, so they need to be imprisoned for the reason what they've done.
Well, in other news today, a joint UK-US military operation has fought off the biggest ever maritime attack on international shipping in the Red Sea. The Defence Secretary said the Royal Navy's HMS Diamond, along with US support, successfully destroyed multiple attack drones deployed by Houthi rebels attacking commercial shipping in support of Hamas. Grant Shapps described the attacks as completely unacceptable and warned there would be further consequences.
HMS Diamond, amongst a number of other US ships, were involved in shooting down a whole barrage of missiles and drones. HMS Diamond herself shot down 7 drones. Remember, this is not usual. It was over 3 decades until a couple of weeks ago that the Royal Navy had not fired anything down in anger. And we cannot have a situation where a major sea route, a major ability to move goods around the world is being cut off by terrorists and thugs, and we therefore must act.
Now, if you find working a bit tough, you're not on your own. The pressure of returning to the office after working from home is proving just too much for some, with around 6 working days lost each year per worker due to stress. A survey of 1,000 people found that noise, distractions and worries about being on show were the main causes of anxiety in the office. Respondents also said their anxiety had become worse in recent months after the trend to work from home during the pandemic came to an end. The estimated cost of building the HS2 rail link between London and Birmingham has soared to £66.6 billion. The chairman of the project, Sir John Thompson, told MPs the increase is due to the original budget estimates being too low, poor standards of delivery and, he said, inflation. In 2013, HS2 was estimated to cost £37.5 billion, and that's for the entire planned network that included the now scrapped sections from Birmingham to Manchester and Leeds. Let's bring you now news from the royal family, and the Princess Royal has been abroad. She's been welcomed to Sri Lanka with a traditional dance display as well as meeting members of the public. As she landed in the South Asian country, there with her husband, she was marking 75 years of British-Sri Lankan diplomatic relations. During her planned 3-day visit, the Princess is due to meet the country's president, as well as his First Lady. She'll also be meeting local community leaders and faith groups in the capital, Colombo. That's the news on GB News across the UK on TV, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker. This is Britain's News Channel.
Thanks for that, Polly. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. This is Dewbs and Co. I always listen to these headlines, and sometimes I think I just need to make a show on its own, just reaction. We could do like Gogglebox reaction to the news headlines, because I don't mean to undermine mental health issues or anything like that. I certainly do not. I do indeed take them seriously. But when I hear things like we're going off with stress because we've got anxiety about being on show in the office, honestly, it makes me cringe inside, and I can't help it. I sit here and I just think, how pathetic are we becoming as a nation, honestly? Try and answer that question for me. Fascinated to what you think about that. Anyway, I'm with you till 7 o'clock. Alongside me, we've got a new face to this show. We like those, don't we? Former Brexit Party MEP Annunciata Rees-Mogg, and alongside her, the political commentator Matthew Stadlen. Good evening.
Good evening. It's really interesting, that story about stress.
I think it's pathetic.
Different things trigger different people. I can come on these sorts of shows, I don't feel any stress or anxiety, but during the pandemic, I just had this thing where I was worried I was going to catch COVID and give it to someone else. And that made going into the studio where I was working really difficult.
Yeah, but that's not this, though, is it? This is people now that are sat at home in the pyjamas having a fantastic time, that have now realised they've got to get dressed, brush their hair, go out. They're now getting anxiety, I'm sure I'm quoting what Polly said correctly, about being on show in an office. I think, are we just creating...
I find it much more stressful to get ready for a Zoom call than I do coming out in person, where you can see a human being and interact like a normal person.
We are creating a nation of wet wipes. Mark my words on that one, ladies and gents. Honestly, if you can't handle people looking at you in an office, how on earth do you think you're going to get on in the world? Anyway, I've got so much I need to talk to you guys about. You are so in touch with me already about the post office scandal. Big news of the day, gbviews@gbnews.com. Get hold of me that way. Email me if you want, or tweet me, GB News. But anyway, big news, post office scandal. Rishi Sunak, first PMQs of the year. Let's get stuck straight in. What did he have to say?
Today, I can announce that we will introduce new primary legislation to make sure that those convicted as a result of the Horizon scandal are swiftly exonerated and compensated. We will also introduce a new upfront payment of £75,000 for the vital GLO group of postmasters. We will make sure that the truth comes to light, we right the wrongs of the past, and the victims get the justice they deserve.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. But let's go live to our political editor, Christopher Hope, then, because the devil in this stuff is always in the detail. Christopher, good evening to you. I love the view that you've got there. Absolutely lovely. Let's get straight into this Horizon one, then. How has this, what Rishi Sunak has said, been received? And then I want you to try and explain exactly what it is that he's proposing.
It's a rare bit of good news for this Prime Minister. He's got ahead of where this story was going, and he's dealt with it pretty quickly. Of course, the issue of the sub-postmasters was put into some relief, and stark relief at that, by this drama on ITV last week, Mr Bates versus the Post Office. The big problem the government had is they were hoping to respond to the scandal once this inquiry, ongoing for many years now, had concluded. But Michelle, it was meant to conclude back in 2022, and now it's 2024. And I think, frankly, outrage about what happened to sub-postmasters just bubbled up and has just gone straight through the front door and out the back door and out the front door of this inquiry, and almost left that back in the sidings. So what's happening now is the government's going to put forward a law in coming weeks, which will expunge the convictions of 980 sub-postmasters. Currently, they've been going through individually each one, and just 1 in 10 of those, 93, have been overturned so far. The government's coughing up more money, £75,000 each. So far, 148 million has been paid out, but I would add to that 150 million more has been paid out to lawyers, not to the victims. That's a different conversation, but that is shocking to me. But for me, this is a plague on all the houses of politicians and officials. Labour government brought in the Horizon computer system with Fujitsu. Fujitsu itself has questions to answer. The Tory government, the Lib Dems, who were the post office ministers back in 2012 to 2010-2012, Sir Ed Davey got a knighted, of course, for services to politics and public service. I haven't seen the anger about this in the emails we're receiving at GB News. It's similar to the expenses scandal, which I worked on for the Telegraph back in 2009. People are furious about it. They see officials, ministers ignoring people, believing computers over upstanding members of the local community, sub-postmasters. It's appalling. I think it's a plague in all our houses. And what you're seeing is politicians desperately clawing their way towards some form of life raft before they get overtaken by events. I
just want to be clear on some of these numbers, right? So this £75,000, is this just kind of an interim, we're going to pass this to you? Because the other figure that's been bandied around a lot is £600,000. And I also saw one of the reactions, the lady called Jo, her case, of course, featured quite heavily in the drama. She was basically getting in touch saying that 75 grand won't even cover the interest on the money that basically people have paid out to the post office. So she wasn't very happy about it. So just give us a bit of clarity, if you can, on those figures.
These are starting payments, and what will happen when they work out how much each individual gets? If you're able to work, if you're a younger person, Michelle, and you found your career prospects wrecked by a conviction that shouldn't have been given out, then you can claim loss of earnings, which can quickly multiply up to a big number. If you're an older person, you might get less in terms of compensation. So I think £600,000 is an average of what might go out, and £75,000 is a down payment on a bigger number in the future.
Yeah, because I mean, I've very quickly, whilst I'm talking, listening, just trying to do a brief set of maths. And if you're saying about 900 people, 75 grand, that's going to be about almost 68 million quid, isn't it? Unless I've really hashed those figures, which is always plausible on national television. But we, of course, the taxpayers, it's us on the hook for this, isn't it?
Well, it is presently. Now, there is calls for Fujitsu, which is a very rich company, an IT company, to bear some of this. And certainly, if this inquiry finds out that Fujitsu was at fault and should have dealt with this earlier and supported ministers in dealing with it earlier, it may be that they are held to account. Now, I've asked Number 10 this week for GB News why they can't just ban Fujitsu from getting any further government contracts until this is all sorted out. They said the problem they've got is that Fujitsu is heavily involved in other parts of government, and to remove them from infrastructure in public life would damage other public services. So they're on the hook slightly with Fujitsu. The government is hooked together with them. But I think there will be a reckoning for people there, for post office staff and the rest, and also for ministers and officials when this inquiry reports. But the first instance is deal with these people who had their lives ruined unfairly, wrongly by this scandal.
Fascinating stuff, isn't it? But for now, Christopher Hope, thank you very much. Annunziata, I'll start with you on this one. I mean, I've been doing this job for 2 years, whatever. I don't think I've ever remembered a story that has captured, I mean, literally my inbox, before I've even gone on air, it is full of people getting in touch about this topic. It has been literally every day since this programme aired. But why do you think it's taken, like a docudrama, in order to bring this to this level of interest? Because people have known about this for years. The media have, and even local communities have. I remember one of my local villages, the sub-postmaster, is one of the people who
was convicted. He pled guilty because he was told he would, with a legal aid lawyer, have no chance of going up against such a respected organisation as the Post Office. So he just fessed up, although he had done nothing wrong, and was left tens of thousands of pounds out of pocket. And it was in lockdown, or part of the way through COVID, that it came out that he was completely exonerated. He was one of the first of the groups to be found not to be at fault. And his conviction has been overturned. And the local Facebook pages were full of outpourings of how bad are we that we judged him. We had no knowledge that he was innocent. We assumed that the court process had been fair and that he had swindled people's pensions. And the village turned against him, and they feel that guilt as well. This touches communities up and down the country.
Well, the mistrust went everywhere because a lot of sub-postmasters... Someone got in touch with my show the other day, and he worked in the shop. And he was telling us, this show, that the sub-postmaster basically took it out on all the staff. That sub-postmaster believed that it must have been one of those staff members that was nicking money from the till or wherever. So this distrust was everywhere that you looked, and why would it not be? Because you're being gaslit all the time. You're the only one, you're the only one. And it's just, that's the bit that I don't understand. So many people involved in this, Matt. Everybody knew that that wasn't the only one. So how did that message continuously get reinforced to these people over and over again?
That point about gaslighting, which is a word we use a lot these days, is a really good one, I think. It's a tragic story, but it's also a scandalous story, and it's a cruel story, partly for the reason you just highlighted. I think it is really important, your question about why it's taken an ITV drama, really to capture the imagination of the public. I mean, that's obvious in a sense, because so many people have watched a drama, but why has it taken a drama to get Rishi Sunak and the government, and I'd say the same if Keir Starmer was currently Prime Minister, why has it taken a drama to get this sort of primary legislation up and about? And I think it's so key that, because we know how our media cycle works, next week it will probably be a different story, we'll have moved on. It is essential that journalists follow this up so that this primary legislation that has been promised actually happens, and happens swiftly, so that Sunak doesn't just get away with a headline if that's what it is.
Yeah, you see, after the break, I want to just pick back up briefly on this story, because I want to just ask you guys at home, do you think this is the right solution then, this emergency law basically to exonerate everybody, including in there, I hate to say it, but there will be perhaps some people that actually were fiddling the books, very small amount of people I'm sure, but basically everyone off the hook. Is that the right blanket approach? This is very unprecedented. Will we see perhaps this kind of approach now becoming commonplace? There's loads of scandals on the horizon, aren't they? Pardon the pun. And if you want to do docudramas, perhaps you might want to look into vaccine injured or waspy women. I can come up with quite a few different topics if there's any documentary makers watching this programme. After the break, I will bring in lots of your thoughts. You really are getting in touch on this one, but I want to also speak to you about the top 10 most depressing towns or cities that you live in the UK. A list is out now showing that top 10. We'll share it with you, see if your place is on there. Should it be on there? And it isn't. And more importantly, how on earth do we fix these towns and cities? I'll see you in 2.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 here on Dewbs & Co. With me tonight, the former Brexit Party MEP Annunciata Rees-Mogg and the political commentator Matt Stadlen are alongside me. We opened the programme talking about the Post Office Horizon system. Matt, you said you wanted to come back and make a point about the IT element.
Yeah, well, just Christopher Hope was saying, and I think it was a really important point that he was making, that politicians and people in authority cannot simply just believe a computer system over human beings. That's one of the things that has been asked of Sir Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats, because he had correspondence, didn't he, with Mr Bates. Mr Bates doesn't actually seem to be angry, does he, with Ed Davey, because that he feels that there was a lot of people who were responsible at the time. But this is moving forward essential, because if you think about reform of the NHS, that's going to likely involve huge changes with computer systems. And if computer systems mess up, as they can do, that could cost lives in their droves.
I think you're absolutely right. The biggest question facing Ed Davey is why did he actually believe that suddenly 700 of the most upstanding members of communities across the country had turned into criminals overnight? And it was the unlikeliness of that happening that should have made him ask the questions about the reliability of the IT. But as you say, as we're moving into an AI world and the medical influence that will have, this could have really major...
And you remember the Little Britain sketch? You know, the computer says no.
I can't
let you do this. Don't put me on the spot, Michelle.
No, you brought it up. Get your back into it.
I can't remember. Oh. Computer says no. That sort of thing. and it's scary.
6 out of 10.
It is scary, though. And as you say, we're in an AI world and computer systems are integral to the way government is run.
Yeah, but you know what?
Make sure we get it right.
You all know this. I'm like a stuck record. My background is IT. I did used to deploy large systems. And I would say, and I think we'll see this, I think it will all come out in the wash, as people say, that actually it was people. People knew that that system was doing things in a certain way. People will have been bonused up to the eyeballs, incentived up to the eyeballs to say that Horizon was delivered successfully so that they themselves personally benefited from it. I think we'll see a lot of that. And also what I found fascinating when it comes to IT, when you look at the track record of the public sector in delivering and deploying new IT systems, is farcical. And when you're bored, go and Google the NHS. One of the biggest, if not the biggest, IT failure when it comes to IT rollouts was the NHS. Last calculations, it was £10 billion plus that it's cost you, me and every other taxpayer.
And I'm not saying that human beings weren't lying about this. I'm just saying that computer systems are not infallible.
This is very true. Many people are highlighting Paula Venables. We spoke about her. She's handing her back a CBE. They're saying she was connected to the church. Well, she's connected to the church. Many people saying, how could she have gone for so long holding on to that CBE, given the values of the church? Many people raised that. You did the same yesterday as well. And Darren says the people that knew about the software bug should stand trial for their defence. deceit and severe incompetence. One of those system architects you might be familiar with, he's asked for immunity from prosecution before he gives any evidence to the public inquiry. What do you make to that one? Let me talk to you about the place where you live. Is it one of the most depressing towns or cities? Because there's a poll. It's a live poll running as we speak that is listing those top 10 places. Let's have a little look at those places, shall we? See whether or not you live there, or whether or not actually you're sitting there thinking, yeah, my place is really depressing and it's not on the list. Why is it not on the list? Let's bring that list up and have a little look at it. The top place that is apparently really depressing in the UK is Peterborough. Number 2, and OK, I do confess, I don't quite know how to pronounce this one properly, but I'll have a bash. I think it's Meddyhampstead. Is it? In the Isle of Wight. If you live there, I'm sure you'll tell me if I've got it wrong. 3, Aberdeen. 4, Parental. When I looked at the Parental website, the tourist website, it describes itself as one of the brightest jewels in English Riviera's crown. Make of that what you will. Swindon, Ealing Mead, Yeovil, Tiverton, Basingstoke and Wells in Somerset. Is your place on there? Do you think it should be on there and not? My key point here is how do we fix these kind of places? I'm not going to get involved in whether or not they're depressing. You know, I'll let you guys fight that out. But if a town is run down, depressing and all the rest of it, how do we fix it?
I think there are huge challenges. I do dispute that Wells is one of the most depressing places. I think it's one of the most beautiful, very small cities in the country, being a Somerset-born girl. But I think we need to reinvigorate our town centres, that there has been a complete depletion for a huge swathe of reasons, from deterring cars and parking to a lot of rebuilding and works, to change of uses, to people having out-of-town centres to go to the incredibly high business rates that are related to the value of the property, and obviously a central location is worth more. The whole system needs reforming because from my perspective, at the end of the day, we are humans. We rely on social interaction. And if you are doing all your shopping, all your goods and services purely online, you are not meeting other people. And that is hugely damaging, particularly for the youngest and the oldest generations who are isolated.
Yeah, and for older people, meeting people in a town square or the village square is, I would have thought, really, really important. I'll give you one example of a very small town on the Welsh borders where I've been going for holidays since I was a little boy. And it really has changed over the years. There used to be a blacksmith, you know, there used to be a shoesmith, a cobbler. There used to be 2 butchers in the middle of this town/village, a post office, a farm, everything. There are still 1 or 2 businesses in the town centre, but because the local supermarket, which is a good supermarket, moved just to the fringes, it dragged business away from that centre. And I think that's really difficult for people living there. I mean, in my area in London, we've got a thriving high street after thriving high street, but we've also got a massive Westfield round the corner. And I would far rather be in a thriving high street, moving from shop to shop, meeting people, recognising people, than crammed together in this massive sort of mecca of shopping.
Let me show you, if I can, whilst we're talking. One of our panellists, Aaron Bastani, he put a video on his Twitter, I think it was, the other day. And I'm just going to play it for you whilst we are talking. I'm showing it now. This is in Waterlooville in Hampshire. I mean, I don't mean to be rude to anyone that lives there, but look at the state of this. If you're listening, not watching, I'll describe it. It's absolutely decimated. It's like a precinct type thing, I would call it. It looks like it's in the city centre. It is just boarded up shop after boarded up shop after empty shop. You've got a charity shop bunged in the middle of that. It's absolutely dead. Why would anyone go there?
So I think I looked at that thread when your producer sent it to me, and I think an explanation is that there is this big shopping mall just round the corner or not far from there, and that has dragged custom away from that particular centre.
Which are, for many people, far more convenient. That a lot of our towns now barely have a bus service. You can't park. In my local town, you get free parking for half an hour. Well, if you want to go to the greengrocer, the butcher, that we're lucky enough to still have, you can't actually do your shopping before your car's due, and they do have people checking and you will get done. And I think we've really got to reinvigorate by letting people get there to spend time in them, to not feel rushed.
So councils have a role then?
Councils have a massive role, and definitely part of that is the business rates. And I think there should be an encouragement encouragement for new businesses to start up, that our greengrocers only opened 2 weeks before Christmas. Young guy, had an idea, took on a shop, but it won't be able to afford the rates ongoing.
But you see, that video that I just shared, I think someone on the council needs to be on the hook for that, because if I think about Hull, you used to have this big, well, you've still got it, you used to have the shopping centre called Prince's Quay, which is one end of town. It's kind of like more towards the old end of town. Then they opened this St Stephen's shopping centre right at the other side of town. So already you're dividing the footfall now literally between completely different ends of the town. Then you had this old thing called the Prospect Centre, which was kind of in the middle but not. And I think, me as a customer, it's like, you've taken the fee, you've taken the custom away, whereas what you should have done is tried to centralise it around like this hub that we've got on the screen now. You should have built your new centre in and around that proximity, and then you've got everything together, all the footfall together. And I used to grow up and we used to say we're going down road. And it was only a certain kind of road, and I guess we'd call it High Street today. And I went down said road the other day in Hull, and it's completely nothing like I remember it. It's a Polish butcher, a halal meat thing, like a God only knows what vegetable kind of shop there. It was just completely different to what I remember growing up in as a child.
And that was sort of the point I was making about this Welsh town, because you just take the Spar shop 100, 200 yards down the road, and that tiny, what we'd think of as a tiny difference, has sucked something of the soul out of the heart of that town. It's still a great town, but it's different.
But also, people go for different experiences, different things. And if every high street has exactly the same chains, all national, all anonymous, big companies, they don't have the attraction to go and find something unusual, a nice present for someone. You literally do your basics and you find the nice stuff on Etsy.
And we haven't talked about digital buying as part of this, but that's inevitably one of the causes, isn't it? And we're responsible, all of us, or a lot of us, because I think it's 35% of retail, something like that, of our sort of shopping is done online. And if we're going to go down that route, and if we're going to be lazy, not everyone can get out and about, but those of us who can, if we're going to be lazy, we are partly culpable.
One of our local supermarkets, they still have the tills open. Another one, they've just reopened the tills. They've got rid of self-service because there's an older population, and that might be the only person they speak to that day. If we lose our town centres, who do those people talk to?
Let me ask you this, though, because we all kind of lament the demise of the high street, don't we? Myself included sometimes. But then if I ask you honestly, when was the last time you actually did your shopping or parts of it online? I don't know, if it's just something simple like your Amazon. Do you still go to the high street? Are you one of those people that goes to the high street, you almost use it as like a shop window? So you'll go, you'll check out your purchase or whatever it is, and then you'll go home and you'll try and go online and find the best possible price for you to buy your stuff. Are you one of those? Get in touch and tell me. Lots of you guys getting in touch. Again, this subpostmaster story, lots of you getting in touch on that. Stephen says, Michelle, in my mind, there's no difference between the mafia and the people responsible for essentially holding a gun to sub-postmasters' heads to confess something that they didn't do. He says it's absolutely unbelievable. Heidi says, well, I live near Yeovil, Michelle, and like many towns in this area, most of the town centres are empty. But you also tell me that you can't even park, you're saying, for more than 30 minutes without paying an absolute fortune. So, yes, she says she does shop online.
Yeovil's on this list, by the way.
It is. And this is a live list, so you can go to, I think it's called ilivehere.co.uk, and you can vote if you want to vote. Who's this? Kay. Kay says, I just want to say that if these are the top 10 depressing towns, then all I can say is that whoever's chosen these towns, whoever's chosen these towns have clearly never been to Doncaster. She says, regards from Kay, who is a depressed Donny resident. She says, was your town on that list? Are you like Kay and think yours wasn't, but it should have been? Get in touch and tell me. I'll have more of your thoughts in just a second. But I want to ask you, do you think you should pay for the school meals of all children, irrespective of how wealthy their parents are? That is a suggestion. Also, I want to ask you as well, is the blue wall crumbling? Lots of rural voters now apparently turning to Labour. Why? You tell me.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock. Alongside me, former Brexit Party MEP Annunciata Rees-Mogg and the political commentator Matt Stadlen. Barry says, Michelle, please, can you lot stop talking about empty shops? You're going to give Rishi Sunak ideas. He'll have them full of people crossing the channel in a nanosecond. Stop with the ideas. That got a tut from Matthew Stadney. He didn't like that one, Barry, I can tell you now. Anne says, Michelle, please, can you add Cambridge to the list of depressing cities? Really? I think it's really quite nice there. Anyway, let's talk politics, shall we? Because a poll apparently has put Labour 4 points ahead in the countryside after promises apparently to support farmers and tackle sewage spills, etc. Let's cut straight to the chase on this. Do you think kind of rural communities are indeed turning their backs on Tory?
I think they might well be turning their backs on the Conservative Party. I don't think they're moving to Labour. I have not had a conversation with anyone in the countryside where I live all the time where they've suddenly gone, I think Keir Starmer's Labour Party are amazing and I want to support them. I think this poll is just a little bit suspect, and it has been reported in the national print press, but it's by a think tank founded by Rachel Reeves, Wes Streeting, Lisa Nandy, John Buddes, Labour Together, who have decided to rescue the Labour Party post the 2019 election, probably have a bit of an agenda, and I think Labour is trying to show themselves to be more attractive in the countryside than they actually necessarily are.
Let's just take the poll at face value for a moment. First of all, I don't think it means that Labour are popular in the countryside, just less unpopular than the Conservatives. But it's fascinating, if true, because we all remember, don't we, that Tony Blair took on the Countryside Alliance in the early years of his administration, the fox hunting and all the rest of it. So if people in the countryside are thinking of voting Labour, that is really bad news for the Conservatives, because this is part of their blue wall, isn't it?
It is the blue wall, and Tony Blair did win a majority in the countryside in both 1997 and 2001, and it had changed by 2005. There is no feeling feeling of that in the Conservative constituency I live in, or the one I'm moving to because they're changing the boundaries around me. The people are really fed up with the Tories, don't feel they're representing them, but they're turning to reform, which I think is a great shame because it's going to split the vote on the right and possibly let Labour sneak in without their vote growing. Let me challenge that, though, because I think there's this really egotistical notion, right, in politics that people's votes somehow belong to either Labour or the Tory, and if a new party has the audacity to pop up, then what you always hear is, oh, they're going to split the vote and hand Labour. These votes don't belong to the Tories, and therefore, how dare you come in? And likewise, by the way, for Labour. Michelle, I think you have raised a really important point. I think one of the things that is happening is that the Conservatives have fallen into the same trap as Labour did in the Red Wall and as the SNP did in Scotland, and Labour before them in Scotland, whereby you ignore your core supporters. You think you're, as a party, more important than them and you know better than them, and you get hollowed out from within and your core base deserts you. And the Conservatives need to listen to their membership and their core vote more, not less. Well, if they did, yeah, but if they'd done that, Rishi Sunak wouldn't be the Prime Minister, would he? But then I open up a whole different can of worms on that one, I'm sure, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's worth remembering, and whenever we talk about this upcoming election, that the hill that Labour has to climb just to get a majority of one, it has to achieve a bigger swing than Tony Blair achieved in 1997. This is not a foregone conclusion. Every vote matters. So I think you're right, Michelle. Both main parties have to scrap as hard as they can in the countryside and in the towns. It's also important to say that I think voter apathy from the Tories could play a huge part, as could reform. I think Richard Tice will take some votes away from the Tories, and that could help Keir Starmer significantly. But voter apathy is important because if Tories don't turn out, Labour doesn't have to be wildly popular in order to win. And actually, Blair achieved a great tranche of his success in that massive landslide victory that we're talking about in 1997. Not necessarily so much because Labour people were pouring out enthusiastically, as we might think of, but actually because Tories were fed up with 18 years of Conservative administration. We're now on 14 years and we hear it day in, day out. What have they done? I think the Tories really need to turn things around very quickly to make sure that huge majority doesn't go Labour's way. But I think the really positive thing about this is they really do have to fight for every vote, both parties. The MPs and the candidates are going to have to listen to the voters. Carol says, Michelle, Tories are losing the farming votes as they've taken away our basic farm payment and replaced it with far inferior payments, which are doing nothing for wildlife. She says, how are we hill farmers supposed to live? And basically, how is the... Well, it's quite a long email, but long story short, she is a farmer, or she certainly has farmers within her family, and she's saying that the Tories have lost their support, and I perhaps suggest that there's more that you know, like yourself. Carol, get in touch and tell me more if you want. After the break, I want to talk to you about school children. Who should pay for their school meals? And I'm not just talking about the people, perhaps the lowest income in society. I'm talking all children, because now there's proposals that all of them have free school meals. Should they or not?
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels
we're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 here on Dewbs & Co. Alongside me, I've got the former Brexit Party MEP Annunziata Rees-Mogg and the political commentator Matthew Stadlen. Let's talk, shall we? Free school meals for all pupils in the land. In London, Sadiq Khan, he has now confirmed that the policy that he created for all primary school pupils in London to have free lunches, that is now going to be extended to 2024/2025. Jamie Oliver, I mean, I've got to say, Sadiq Khan celebrated this. He put a nice tweet out celebrating it. And seconds later, Jamie Oliver got on board, saying, yes, this is all great and all the rest of it, but actually it should be extended nationwide. All school kids in the UK, free school meals. I've got to say, no such thing as a free lunch. So what we mean is taxpayers paying for everyone else's children to have their meals for free, including the wealthy. Where are you on this, Annunziata?
Never before in my life have I found myself agreeing with Jamie Oliver and Sadiq Khan.
Wow, first thing for everything.
Quite a surprise to me, but I don't think it should be secondary school pupils, but primary school pupils. I think it should not be stigmatised, it should not be means tested, but one good meal a day should be provided. That head teachers up and down the country have mentioned problems with children's concentration because they are not having decent food before school, and then if they don't get it during school, that gets.
But isn't that a failure of parents? If you can't be bothered to give your own child breakfast before he or she leaves the house, then, I mean, come on.
There are huge failures from the parental side. But schools still have a duty to teach, and they need the children to be teachable. And I think it's always costly to impose a means test. That's an extra administrative burden on the school. Comes with extra costs, reduces the ability to bulk buy. My 5-year-old has free school meals because in her school the policy is any child under 7. So reception years 1 and 2, they get free school meals, they get a hot meal in the middle of the day. And I think that's a great start.
I think good for Sadiq Khan. If we're not going to invest in our children, who are we going to invest in? To my slight shame, because I went to a private school, I never really thought about this. I just took my school meals for granted. And actually the idea that you get lots and lots of kids outside of London not getting a free school meal, not getting that sort of nutritional boost, which should be a basic thing to their school day, I find rather horrifying. And I hope that this is extended much more broadly outside the capital. On this issue of whether we as taxpayers should be funding richer kids' meals at state schools, I have to say I agree with you, Annunziata, because you don't want poorer kids to be stigmatised. You don't want some kids to have to say, yeah, please can I have my free school meal while the others don't.
Yeah.
But I mean...
And I think that's much harder at the secondary school level, where they tend to have canteen style and you can choose X or Y, and if you're on the free school meals, that'll be more limited.
But also don't underestimate how poor, how low income so many people are in this country, and the cost of living crisis.
And those people get free school meals. I don't want any... Just for the record.
They don't, though. They don't. Lots of people here, in this thing that Jamie Oliver released, to qualify it in some areas, your household income has to be £7,400 or less after tax and before benefits. That means, according to Oliver, that there are about 1 or 2 million children whose families are in poverty or financially struggling who are excluded from free school lunch.
I want to just play devil's advocate a little bit, if I may, because when you start providing one free school lunch and then you're saying, oh yeah, we need to, if we don't invest in our children, you know, what are we going to do? Why draw the line at a free lunch then? Why not give 3 square meals a day? Why not convert the PE hall into a sleep area and let people sleep there? Why are you drawing the line between what parenting intervention the school is going to do at one meal?
Well, I'll explain why. Primarily because by the time of tea time, you've left the school, so then you go home, and then it really is the parents' responsibility. At breakfast time, similarly, that's preschool, and parents should do their very best for their children. Lunch fits squarely in the middle of the school day, and I think it's essential.
And there are politicians who definitely want to take it too far. I recall reading about teachers being asked to teach their pupils how to brush their teeth, which personally I think should definitely come under the parents.
Yeah, but you know what? I had an issue with that, and I debated that on this show at the time, and I was really against it. And the reason I was against it is because I think so many parents currently are burn idle. I can't stand it. They burn idle. They neglect their children. And when you start going, no, it's all right, we'll brush their teeth, we'll feed them, we'll do this, you are taking inch by inch. But actually, I listened to a lot of people, a lot of teachers got in touch with me, and they convinced me. It happens. I do change my mind sometimes. They convinced me that actually, what harm is it doing? You can have companies that'll provide the products, a toothpaste and toothbrush, whatever, sponsorship or whatever, so the cost will be negligible, if any. And actually, if what you're doing is you're teaching those kids a life skill, they're all doing it together, it becomes like a good part of the hygiene and all the rest of it, then why not? And they did kind of convince me in lots of ways, I must confess.
The more we can do to protect children from neglectful parents, the better. Yes, that might disincentivise parents to get their act together, but we can't punish children for the crimes of their parents.
Do you know what I would be doing? And this is very controversial, and we haven't got time to get in this, maybe it's a debate for another day. When you've got these neglectful parents, because everyone knows who they are, and I'm not talking about people that are so poor that they literally cannot provide for their children, I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the parents that deliberately abuse and neglect their children. If those people had to be sterilised after they've abused one child or one set of siblings, you would see a dramatic fall in the amount of children that would be abused in this country.
I mean, you've lost me there. I mean, you could just execute them, couldn't you? I mean, where do you stop with that? Come on.
That's what I said. It's a debate for the other day. Well, I'll tell you now, you won't like the debate I'm having tomorrow then, because I'm going to debate tomorrow whether or not people that look at child abuse images, I refuse to use that horrendous term child porn, because there's no such thing as a crime scene, thank you very much. If people that view those kind of images should be chemically castrated, I absolutely think they should, and I think the state should be rolling out a policy on that regard. But anyway, that is perhaps for a different day.
We've got prison for those people, Michelle.
You say that. Don't even get me started. You wait, guys, till tomorrow. The story that I'm going to share with you tomorrow, it's going to make your hair curl. Because, yeah, you've got prison when people are actually put in that, but the amount of people that are not put in prisons, that are wandering the streets, that seem to think it's OK, looking at children being abused is eye-watering.
And it's not for life.
Yeah, anyway, we shall get on to that one for tomorrow. We started the programme with Polly Middlehurst doing the news headlines, talking about the amount of people now that have got stress and anxiety because they've had to stop working from home, going into the workplace. I don't mean to undermine mental health conditions, but when we're at a level now when we're saying that people have got genuine anxiety issues, because I quote, it was along the lines of people looking at me in an office, I mean, you've got to ask yourself, what kind of society do we want? I'm arguing that we are literally creating a nation of wet wipes, and if you cannot have it within you to be in an office and interact with people, how on earth are you going to get through life? Jill says, Michelle, at my school we've got kids who are being conditioned into thinking they can't do normal day-to-day stuff because of anxiety. She says we've got to normalise anxiety. Feeling nervous, for example, before a big meeting or an exam or an interview is normal. It shouldn't be medicalised. You're arguing that parents are too quick to excuse their kids from everything. She says, I fear for the future. future. Being forced to go to the office is a terrible attack on the rights of the work-from-home pyjama classes by the evil Tories, says David. I've got to say, some of you guys, you do make me laugh, but some of your stuff, which I read every night, I can't read it out on national television at tea time. Michelle, why should I pay for free school meals? I don't even have any kids, says Tarman. Matt, that's all I've got time for. Nusiata, thank you for your time. Thank you for your company. Naja Faraj up next. Night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Clear skies in the south overnight, cold and frosty in places, but actually a lot of cloud is covering the UK, and that cloud's being carried from the east and northeast by an area of high pressure sitting to the north. Now, the high pressure is generally keeping things settled at the moment, although we have seen some drizzly showers in places where the cloud has been low enough, especially for eastern and northeastern England. We keep that going through the night. It tends to become drier for many, however, and with clear skies in the south as well as for western Scotland, there will be a frost in places. So a chilly start to the day, frost-free for the North Sea coast, but here we've got that easterly or northeasterly wind, so feeling cold. There'll be fewer showers across northern England, southern Scotland, Wales compared with Wednesday. Actually, plenty of dry weather. Best of any sunshine will be limited to the southwest of England, southwest Wales, and increasingly central and western Scotland. Otherwise, a lot of cloud building through the day. And that cloud by Friday morning is sitting across England and Wales predominantly. So frost-free, but grey skies to begin things. Some fog around as well. Scotland and Northern Ireland, brighter skies, but a chilly start with the widespread frost. And then colder conditions arrive from the north on Saturday and into Sunday. Cold enough for frequent snow showers in the far north. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
An offer from Rishi Sunak at Prime Minister's Questions today, but we asked tonight, is it enough? Rwanda, back on the agenda, amendments being put down, but is the Conservative Party as divided as ever? And really, should we not just grasp the nettle of leaving the ECHR? And the Royal Navy, back in action again, warding off multiple attempts at drone strikes yesterday, and yet we can't recruit enough sailors. What on earth are we going to do? But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you and good evening. Well, post office workers caught up in the Horizon IT scandal